Hello, my name is James Prickett. I'm here at the museum on 115 South 4th Street, Waynesville, Ohio. And today we're going to be interviewing about 4 or 5 different people talking about their memories of Caesars Creek Lake. The objective is to get their emotional thoughts of how one can have their home taken away from it's a lawful means to do this, but it has huge consequences. And one of the things that you might think of is Caesars Creek Lake is filled with tears of the residents of New Burlington and the surrounded community. So join us as we interview these charming individuals. Hello, my name is James Prickett. I live here in Waynesville, Ohio, and I'm part of the membership and on the maintenance committee here at the museum at Waynesville, Ohio, 115 South 4th Street. And we're going to do something interesting here. I am today with Robert Vance, is that how you, Vaughn? Roger Vaughn. And Roger, what we're here for today is about New Burlington. And today we're in a room known as the New Burlington Room. And what we want to discuss is New Burlington, which is a town that no longer exists. Where was New Burlington located?
New Burlington, Ohio, not Cincinnati, was located in the northwest part of Clinton County. It involved Chester Township, it involved in Greene County, Spring Valley Township, and also your township of Wayne borders New Burlington also. It's more of a community than just a very tiny little town. At least that's how I thought of it. It was a bigger area than just one little town affected by the Army Corps of Engineers in 1970.
About how many people probably lived in the town? It's kind of a crossroads. I've been in it when I was younger.
Well, I'm guessing in its heyday, maybe 300 or some, and at 380 that goes through there as a underground railroad road, and that was one of the main reasons that New Burlington started out.
What kind of businesses were in New Burlington?
Well, they had, what you'll hear about later, a hardware store, the Lowe's of today, I suppose, and a couple grocery stores and a barber shop, and that's what I remember about it. And my play only comes in from about 1967, and some other people later can really get back into the 50s and 40s. So,
what happened to New Burlington?
Well, the Army Corps of Engineers prior to 1970 thought that they need to control some type of flooding that really was situated on the Little Miami River in southern Warren County around Morrow. It always flooded down there. So if they could control the northern Caesar Creek and Anderson Fork that come together at New Burlington, they would have a dam that could keep the flooding minimal down at Mara and a little bit south of Mara.
Yes, and it's been a huge project. It's been a benefit to a lot of the recreational boaters and everybody. But that's been how long ago, roughly?
It really developed in 1970, and I did not know till this spring that the lake was actually supposed to go farther north up 380 to Spring Valley Paintersville Road, and for some reason that part of the lake got discontinued.
Yeah, they came in with a lot of money and they seem to have bought an awful lot of ground, way more than the lake itself. A lot of farmers I know lost ground that would never be underwater, but at the same time I think the state had this idea that we will use it in the future for recreational purposes, so they got it while the land was cheap. A little bit more about your connection is how do you know about New Burlington? You said you were kind of born into it.
Well, I'm married into a very prominent farm family, the McKay family, and I think I was the last one to be married in New Burlington, in the old Methodist church there, and there was a Masonic lodge hall that was sort of adjacent to it and had a connection to it, and that was in 1970. So, and I've always enjoyed history, and that area is just loaded with history. New Burlington area, clear back from the Indians and the Shawnee, the Underground Railroad with some of the slave houses around, the Doster House on New Burlington Road, and there's a couple others in our area.
Do you personally know of anybody that received a letter from the state of Ohio that said we're acquiring your ground?
I don't know about the letter, but I know people that have had to leave, and most of them that had to leave New Burlington Village found places that were very close by. They didn't move 100 miles away. They moved either a mile down the road or 5 miles down the road. They were still right in the community.
I notice it seems like a lot of them moved just south on 380, just about a mile up on top of the hill.
And the other thing was the houses in New Burlington were built so well that in '69, and they actually moved the houses down 380, huge houses. Moved them right down 380, moved telephone lines and everything. And there's a lot of houses on New Burlington Road, which is just south of New Burlington, that those houses are there now and look great.
What'd you think about it when they came in with the chainsaws and all the bulldozers and all of that stuff? I witnessed it too. It was quite an amazing sight. It was heartbreaking, wasn't it?
It was bad, and I think you were right when you said that they wanted this bigger area for future use. You know, they took more than they needed, but maybe at some point it's campgrounds down there now and hunting everywhere all around the adjacent lake. It's more than boating and fishing.
Well, I think you set a wonderful stage on what New Burlington is kind of like. I look forward to interviewing some of our other people that we'll be doing here shortly and getting an idea of their personal things. Is there anything you'd like to add about New Burlington? Any personal experiences or thoughts or memorabilia about the village?
Well, if you look behind you,
yes,
there's a nice barber chair.
Yes, I see that.
Maybe somebody else will comment on it. But it was a chair that was in New Burlington at a barber shop. And my wife's mother took all her brothers down there to get haircuts. And when the barber retired, Genny Noggle, he says, I think you need this chair. You got all these boys. There's no use you paying money to get a haircut. You take this chair home with you, give them burr haircuts at home.
Ah.
So she took it, she cut all the kids' hair in it, and then when the time came, it came back to the museum here.
Well, the museum is grateful, and we have a lot of things that we have in here are read, as far as there's pictures and photographs as we have of New Burlington, as well as we have Lytle, and we have a lot of information, but a lot of things. I invite the folks to come and check the museum again out, and again, it's 115 South 4th Street here in Waynesville, Ohio, and enjoy what we have in the way of history on New Burlington. I look forward to talking to our next individual on our lineup. And Roger, I thank you for coming today and telling us a little about a community that no longer exists.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir. I am with Charles McIntyre, and as far as I'm grateful that you came today to the museum. I really am, in order to document some of the things that happened in New Burlington. Again, we are in the New Burlington room, so it may bring back some of the memories and so on in the town. And in talking to you, I found out that you do have a farm on the east side. What's the name of that road that goes east out of New Burlington?
New Burlington, Lumberton Road,
Okay. And how big of a farm did you have there?
150 acres.
150. And how far was it to town?
1.5 miles.
1.5 miles.
It's
So
right at
you-
the intersection of Gurneyville and New Burlington Road.
And what do you remember the fondest maybe about the little town of New Burlington?
Well, it was my hometown. I went to first grade there. You're going to talk to Peachy Hawkins shortly. Her mom was my first grade school teacher. I remember her very well and knew her until they are no longer with us. And I loved the hardware store. I was just always been a technical kind of guy, a geek, fixing things, building things, the grocery store, the church.
That reminds me, my uncle Paul K. Peterson, we were talking about, he was big into varmints. You guys had problems with groundhogs and a lot of stuff.
Sure.
He'd run down there for ammunition all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely, it was a place to go. What can you tell me you remember about the hardware store College? How big was it and how important was it to you? It was probably like a Lowe's at its time to you, wasn't it?
It was the source of he didn't have it, you didn't need it. It was pretty much that sort of thing. He was almost an appliance store as well as bolts and nuts and everything for the kitchen, you know, women. Earlier, before him, it was a farm store where they sold implements and stuff. But then when Don Collett took it over, it became that. And I came along about that time. A transition took place. I remember in the hardware store, like I said, bolts and nuts and things. I was always going to town for parts. I wanted a motor scooter real bad, and well, I just wasn't going to have one. I'd kill myself, so I built one. Wheelbarrow wheels and a whole motor I found and some wood. So I needed parts. So stuff.
Yeah. Now it's interesting. I've heard that then I've seen at times that the floodwaters of Caesars Creek itself pretty well got up into the store, right at its back door. So New Burlington itself even has had flooding issues all along down in that lower part of town, pretty much, correct, from what you remember?
The lower part was not uncommon along Anderson's Fork to get flooded every few years perhaps, but then to get up into the main town, like into the hardware store, that was very rare. And I remember that particular year. I don't remember the year, but I lived on Gurneyville at the time, raising kids, and the rains came and the backyard was just filled with water, and I knew, well, that's going to end up in Burlington soon. So I got in the truck and went down there about 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and people were standing in a corner, and we watched it come up. And then Collins Hardware was the source of propane tanks and stuff, and so we all went down into the lower part of town, and here we floated propane tanks up from the houses so they didn't float away in the flood waters.
Oh my.
So it got up into the hardware store that year. It was bad.
Well, to focus on some of the people that you may have known and that received information that their farms or their property may be taken, what's kind of your memories maybe? I'm sure they weren't gleeful. I'm sure Caesar Creek was built on their tears. So what do you remember about those thoughts, those days?
Well, I knew a lot of people that happened to. It didn't happen to me, but it happened to my grandmother. She had sold or moved off the farm and had a little house in New Burlington along with her sister, Skeeter Reeves, his mom, and another sister. That was their retirement. So when they became displaced, and my mom had to leave, so she moved in with her sister Hazel in Spring Valley in a trailer. That didn't work out, and then she came back to live with my parents, and then she just died. She just died a sad old lady. I'm pretty sure I know of a fella who lived on Brimstone, a black guy who saw stakes on his farm where they were going to take part of his bottom land or all of his bottom land, and he ultimately died from that. So there's sad stories about it. It just happens. So I hated Caesars Creek Lake at the time. I just detested the idea that they could do that, because You know, that was my little world.
I understand,
Sure.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And
church,
it's,
everything, got married there, everything.
you know, we have Brown Reservoir, people lived where Cowan Lake was, people live where Rocky Fork is,
Mhm, yeah.
and one time we even heard that they planned on maybe a dam for the Little Miami River, which Waynesville wouldn't be here, and we'd be in a hydroelectric lake right now, but
Mhm.
they stopped with you guys that
Mhm.
way, and it stopped a lot of the flooding, I'm sure.
Oh, downstream, it helped the downstream
Yeah.
folks.
Can you think of anything that you would like to tell history about New Burlington before you leave?
Well, I got a haircut in that chair when I was a kid. Geez.
Mind blowing what has happened. It's 50 years ago, isn't it?
Well, since you're focusing on that, I mean, New Burlington was a 50-year, 40-year span for me of my life. So you know that the lake thing was just the tail end of it, I guess.
Have you ever been on the lake?
Down the road later in the 80s, I think 90s, we got a boat and it's a beautiful lake. You know,
Yes.
I did enjoy it. And we camped there. And, yeah.
Well, we thank you for your memories. Is there
Sure.
anything more you would like to add?
Not till I leave.
That's great. I appreciate that very much. And so we thank you for
Yeah.
joining
Oh,
us.
Thanks for
So
putting this together.
we'll be interviewing our next individual here in a
Really?
moment.
I'll warn them. Okay.
So appreciate it. Just sit still with me. Thank you all.
Okay.
And we'll see you in just a moment. Hello again. I'm with Sarah Hawkins. Glad to meet you, ma'am. And talking to her a little bit about her life experiences in New Burlington. You lived there from age 1 to age 12, right?
Correct.
And where did you live in New Burlington?
I grew up on a farm on the north edge of town. I don't, if this picture here, over here on the top right corner, our farm property was on both sides of State Route 380 and ran behind the homes, almost down to the Roxana Road, Lumberton Road.
So you were actually living in ground that was taken.
Yes.
So you're one of my first people today that you can remember what you saw and what you heard. Now this went on prior to age 12 would be my guess. So about what age did this kind of sneak on that you heard maybe your parents talk about this? Oh no.
It seems like, and I have no one to ask, it seems like there was talk of this a few years before it actually became a reality. I remember going to meetings and I was small and I would lay my head over on my parents' lap during these meetings. For the people of the town just basically begged them not to take their town. It was our home.
I could imagine. What do you remember the discussions with your mother and your father that was going on at home?
It was just very sad. The farm that we lived in, my mom was born there. It's where her parents had lived, and you know, it was ours.
Yeah.
And it was being taken away from us. And I remember when they would come and meet with my parents about buying it, and they would give an offer, and my mom and dad would just say, "This is absurd." And they said, "Well, this is what a willing buyer would give a willing seller." And my dad would say, "We are not willing. We don't want to sell." But they had no choice.
Did they end up taking it by eminent domain and then gave them a fair market value price and said, go, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Where did you go to?
We actually moved a couple miles up the road on Cemetery Road.
Okay.
They bought
North or south?
north.
Okay.
We bought 63 acres of bare ground, and they built a little ranch home and barn, and
they lived happily ever after, I hope, after that.
They did.
Okay.
They did. It was just,
Yeah.
it wasn't home. It was a nice little ranch home, but it wasn't the big old farmhouse that we knew and loved.
Well, every childhood, about that age, 10 to 12, you're running all the streets of New Burlington. So was there a lot of kids, a lot of friends, and did you have a lot of good times in New Burlington?
I did. My very best friend in New Burlington was Jane Collett. Her dad had Collett Hardware. And we, you know, when there were floods in town, my parents and everybody would kind of go to the hardware store, go to the grocery, lift everything up, get it up on higher shelves, and then when the water receded, everybody go back down and help.
It was in the store?
It would get in the store,
Oh
yes.
my, I didn't think it got that
No,
far.
it got in the store.
Wow.
So, but that was just life in New Burlington.
And then they did not have a school there, but your mother said she taught there, but
There was a
evidently-
one-room schoolhouse there. By the time I got in school, it was no longer in operation, but my mom started teaching there in New Burlington.
And then they took you went then to
We went to,
Xenia.
yeah, we were in Spring Valley School District, which was part of Xenia.
And what was your thoughts about what I call the bulldozing, the chainsawing? Did that affect you as that child when you saw everything that you saw was beautiful stripped?
It did. Honestly, it probably breaks my heart more now than it did at the time, just where I was.
I've seen some of those valleys and meadows and along Caesar's Creek. It was totally unspoiled,
Right.
and they're all gone.
Right, and see, New Burlington is still there. It is not underwater.
That's
it is
true.
Just grown up
That's true.
for not good things to happen.
The old highway at 380 is still visible.
Right.
Is the intersection still there?
You can see the bridge
The old bridge there. What was
Yeah.
that went east and west, which
Yeah.
was what road was that?
it was on Lumberton,
Lumberton.
New
Yeah, because if you
Burlington,
went east, it would take you to Lumberton.
Roxana, yeah.
And it was, I gather, a large post office rural route in the
Mhm.
area.
Rural Route 1.
Rural Route 1, so that covered a large vicinity, so therefore a lot of people were associated themselves with New Burlington
Right.
that really didn't live in New Burlington.
Right.
Well, is there anything else that you might want to talk about the little village that you can remember?
It was just a neat little town. There were a few homes that elderly women lived in. Their husbands had passed. And I can remember one in particular, Abby Curry. She would have little tea parties and make these little sandwiches. And we would go down, the girls would go down and we'd have a little tea party with her. And you know, I remember the parades that we used to have on Memorial Day. Memorial Day was a big deal. It meant a lot to those people.
And let me
4th of
see,
July.
was there a gas station also?
There was.
that Bailey's by chance, or who? No,
McClure's.
McClure's had a
Mhm.
gas station on the corner. I
Mhm.
remember that. That was on the southeast
Right.
corner.
And then there was the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who I remember had it was Ronnie Groom's, and then Collett's.
And a large grocery store, or pretty simple?
It was a simple grocery store.
And so if you wanted things, you went to Wilmington or you went back to Xenia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other memories? No?
All the holidays were fun. Everybody.
All the memories. And you were relatively young.
I was young.
And my sympathy, I think that probably at age 12 is probably the worst age that you can probably see a parent crying over something that you cannot help your parents.
My parents, till the day they died, would tear up.
Yeah. Just like what we said, you know, Caesar's Creek is built on a lake of tears.
It is.
Thank you. Hello again. This time I am with Rosalie Beers, and she has a lot of interesting stories about New Burlington too. You might say she kind of married into the community from what I gather. Rosalie, what do you remember about New Burlington? What would you like to talk about the town?
Well, one is that everyone knew everyone else in town, and they kind of watched, especially as we were growing up, that we were okay, and that with that, people knowing that I had an aunt that lived in New Burlington, and you, there was the grocery store, and there was of course the hardware store and the gasoline station and all those kinds, and the post office. And importantly, Grace Miller ran the post office that I remember. Later on, it was another postmistress. But Grace also had a little deli that she had to the back of the store. And coming into town, it was always great to go and stop and get a 5 or 10 cent ice cream cone. Best ice cream that I can remember. And those kinds of things have faded. And those are good memories.
Yeah. I'm anxious to hear more about Mr. Collett. I know he's not here and his family. We don't have some connections, so I know they have the place that's on 73 at 71, and they had to move that store and they moved over there. But what can you tell me about John? Is it John Collett? Don Collett. What can you tell me about this gentleman? Because he was the heart of the town, it seems like.
Well, Don Collett had 2 brothers, Charles or Chuck, and a brother, Eugene, or Sam, Samuel. I'm not sure exactly. He had a nickname. I think everyone in town had some kind of a nickname. And Don and Chuck really started the hardware store following their father, I think, was the way it went. But Don, one of the things that I've learned about him is the fact that he helped a lot of kids go through college. He gave them jobs and, saw that they had the means to go to college. And that was an important thing. Not everyone did that. And the fact that Don, to go to Don's store, you kind of caught up with the community news.
Oh yeah, I'll bet.
And, that's important. And the fact that one of the stories I can remember is that one Sunday at church, my mother made the comment that she was about ready to run out of bottled gas. You know, the gas that were in the canister or
the tall tanks, yeah, cooking.
And Mom had been had canning and everything, and she said to Don, "I think I'm about ready to run out of gas. Tomorrow you can bring a bottle up." He said, "I'll tell you what, Ada, I don't want you running out of gas. I'll bring it. I'll go home, change clothes, and I'll bring it this afternoon." And he did, and Mom didn't run out of gas, and all was well.
Oh, that's something that says a lot about his spirit.
Yeah.
The people that lived in the community, did you have connections with people that had issues with losing their property?
Well, again, at that time, I lived away from there, although we lived in Bellbrook at the time, which is just, across the Little Miami. But yes, I mean, people, when they started talking about it seriously, it was like, we've heard about this for a long, long time. Is it really going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
And then when it did, yes, people were very emotionally upset about it. And I remember hearing my dad talk about, some of that.
What do you remember your father saying?
Well, Daddy was a historian per se, and he said, I just can't imagine them flooding the Indian mounds, which, as I understand, are, under the water.
Yeah, there's one down on Mound Road.
Right, right. And he said, I just can't understand that. I can't understand why they don't realize this is an important part of history. That, this was a special part of Ohio that was founded. And, of course, farming community, very valuable farmland.
Yeah. Did you ever go to Ferdix and pick strawberries down there in the bottoms? It's a little bit further south, but.
No. I did not.
Okay, but
But
all that ground's gone, ain't it?
That's correct.
It's all
And
underwater.
blackberry picking in the summer, you know, all the wild blackberries, and you go and there were a lot of blackberry briars around that, you know, we went. The Peterson girls and I went, and
And you had a connection with the town in another way too, which is with your husband.
yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about your husband? Because we're going to interview you both in a minute here.
Yeah.
So what can you tell me about it's John?
That's right. John Walter Beers Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And John came to the Methodist Church. He was appointed to the New Burlington Methodist Charge, I think in 1959. And on that charge were 4 churches, New Burlington and Zor, which is on Spring Valley Painters Hill Road, and Harveysburg and Sharon. And he would do 2 churches each Sunday.
Well,
And-
that is wonderful. We're going to get him back here in just a moment to discuss some things that way, and you'll get a chance to see, you know, to handle 4 churches on a Sunday.
Yeah, and he was a student, a seminary student.
Whoa, quite a talented individual.
But you know, I want to tell you something about that. That when New Burlington Church, like most churches, to have a new minister, and they invited his family to come down from Columbus, Ohio. John was a transplant to farmland. He was strictly a city boy. He graduated from Ohio State University and everything. But anyhow, his father came down, and my dad, and his father, Walter Beers, and my father Albert were talking, and they noticed something. They were wearing Masonic pins, and they were both Masons. And one of the things about New Burlington, the old schoolhouse was purchased by the Masonic Lodge of New Burlington, and it was there where I joined Eastern Star, and my family, the men, were very involved in the Masonic Lodge, and until New Burlington was done away with. And of course, you talk about people, how they felt. The news of that they're going to have to build or go or whatever, and then they built the new building over at Spring Valley. So there's a lot of raw memories and
very well.
a lot of good memories.
Yeah, us, the young people now today, they think that, wow, that lake has been there forever. Let's just go over and play. They don't know what had to transpire with people's lives to give that ground up, do they?
You're right. And if you go visit, don't go just to Caesars Creek very many times, but you go visit and you see all the license plates from all over the place and out of state and everything, and all the boats and so forth. It's a whole different atmosphere.
I know.
And I think too that growing up in New Burlington, Ohio, when I went to work at NCR, they wanted to know what my address was, and it was Rural Route 1, New Burlington, Ohio. Well, isn't there something more than that? No, that's it. Well, what's your phone number? New Burlington 332. What's the rest of the number? It's New Burlington 332. And the mutual telephone exchange, you know, 2 short rings was our number.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
1, 2, yeah,
And quite often you were on a party line,
yeah.
and some people like to listen to the party and get their news.
I've done that at my grandmother's house.
And you know, that's something that you'll never experience.
No, those are wonderful experiences. Well, I thank you. We'll be bringing your husband in here, and we'll continue the story in just a moment.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Stay seated. We're back again, this time with Rosalie and John Beer. And this time we have a married couple, and it's quite precious that you guys have been married for a long time. And this is your husband, correct?
Well, yeah, I'll claim him.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about what's going on in your connections with New Burlington, and then you have a picture and you can talk a little bit about this, but how did you guys meet, and what's kind of the connections with the New Burlington?
Well, I was the pastor, and I moved to that church, was assigned to the New Burlington Church, and one of the first people I met was Rosalie.
I said my name, we came through, and I said my name was Rosalie McKay. And Lizzie Reeves, who's a relative of Gene Reeves and Charles McIntyre. Anyhow, she pointed out the fact her name was Lizzie Reeves, and she said to him, "I'm not married either." And at that time, there were several of us young girls in the church, and I wasn't too impressed with him. Can you imagine? But anyhow, my father thought that he ought to come to Sunday dinner, and he did, and we got to talking, and we found we had a lot of things in common, and one was music. And he had been a member of the Ohio State University marching band when he was at Ohio State. And he was going to be a part of the the Ohio Ministers Choir. Was it West Ohio?
West Ohio.
West Ohio Ministers Choir. And so in 1962, when we were married, our honeymoon was with the West Ohio Ministers Choir because they went on choir tour to Europe. And so that was our honeymoon with, I think there were 78 chaperones, you know.
And then you ended up preaching some in New Burlington somehow.
Yes.
And I understand it wasn't just one church you were dealing with.
4 churches
How can you deal with 4 churches on a Sunday?
in a hurry. About two a week or something.
And so, I mean, like New Burlington, would you do the Sunday morning worship service there?
There would be 4 services. I'd do at least one a week, and it would be every 4 weeks. It'd all be done.
It was
A couple of them.
Zor Church.
Zor, Harveysburg,
At
Sharon, Zor.
what was the time? 9:30. 9:30 at Zor, and then he'd come to New Burlington for 11 o'clock service. And then the next Sunday it was
Harveysburg and Sharon.
Harveysburg and Sharon with the same.
So in 2 weeks, I got all 4 of them.
Did John have to deal with a lot of the heartbreak or the people at that time, or was he fortunate enough that he was before or after them?
He served New Burlington before the Army Corps of Engineers project really became a real project.
Was there talk about it during the time when you were preaching? Or
Not a great deal.
Not a great deal. You knew it was a possibility, but during the time that you were there, it did not really happen yet.
I don't believe it did.
And you have an interesting picture which we'll scan and we'll show people, but what do you have here?
Well, this is a picture that was taken on our wedding day and of our wedding party at the front of the New Burlington Methodist Church. These were the stained glass windows which had nameplates in them with family names in them. The McKay family name was a name. I believe Collett was another family name. I really kind of forget what other family names were there, and I believe there were, I think maybe 6 stained glass windows with names, maybe, no, 8, because of the 2 in the back. And it's interesting that February the 10th, 1962 is when we were married, and it snowed. It snowed about 8 inches of snow the night before, and we had people coming in from all over. Also, because John was a minister and I had a home minister, Norman Williams, I wanted him to be one of the officiating ministers. John was an associate pastor at Xenia First Methodist, and Conrad Deem, who was his senior pastor, wanted to be a part of the service. John went evidently to a district meeting, and his district superintendent said, John, I understand you're going to be married now. Now I want to be part of that service. So we were married 2:30 in the afternoon with 3 ministers before us. And as the one said, does anyone know of any reason why they should not lawfully be joined? It just happened that an avalanche of snow fell off of the roof. And the wedding reception was at home in the house with lots and lots of people in the house. And while the photographer was taking pictures, Dad Beers had a movie camera that was on a light bar, and one of the lights exploded. And my older sisters thought it was the main beam of the house exploding because there were so many people in the house. So that's something to remember and to pass on. And evidently it worked, because 60 plus years.
So you really love the village of New Burlington. Did you go to the other church services outside of New Burlington with him, or you just
No,
basically?
because I wasn't dating him at the time that he was our minister. I didn't date. I evidently wasn't too appealing until I moved to an apartment in Dayton. And then he came to visit me, and so no, the only time that, you know, yes, I visited the churches, you know, in some way, but not necessarily.
And now I thank you very much. And I believe you said you were living about 1.5 miles east of New Burlington on a farm
Yes,
where you grew up.
that's right.
And that was how many acres?
Approximately 350 acres.
How come did you give it up? I mean,
Well-
this wasn't taken by the lake. You just took an investment and run.
No, that it was my father's farm, and then when Daddy passed, then my older brother Wilbur McKay farmed,
Okay.
and now Wilbur's son Stephen, and Priscilla, his sister, Priscilla Vaughn, owned that land,
Okay.
and we built a house on the McKay property in 2000 when John retired the first time. He retired twice from being a minister. Retired after so many years, and then he retired again and completing 60 years of ministry to the United Methodist Church.
Okay. And you have a lot of fond memories about the village and what was there.
That's
and
right.
It ain't there no more.
And you know, you
Never
can
be.
you can compare that to a lot of places in Ohio, but you know, there's only one place that you fondly remember as New Burlington, Ohio, and it was in Clinton County and in Greene County.
Oh, that's right. It did split.
The Methodist parsonage was right on the line.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I do remember seeing a
We were
sign.
practically in both.
Yeah. Mm. Well, that's a good way to end it. A little bit of humor there. And I thank you both. I appreciate you helping us out to figure out a little bit of history on what transpired in New Burlington. Again, I thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. As you have seen from these conversations that we've had this afternoon, that a lot of people do have fond memories of their childhood, their middle ages and older, and what they witnessed, say their parents going through. We can never imagine. I don't think any of us will have anything taken away from us unless an interstate goes through your property. And I pray that we don't have anything by eminent domain takes anything away from you all. But it shows you that a town can exist in the United States of America, and it can disappear just as quickly. So thank you for joining us, and support the Waynesville Friends Museum here. We'd love for you to come by and pay a visit. It's loaded with all the historical things that are related to this entire township. So see you again on some other adventure.